My blissful shells. Today, let us know in brief how human birth is more precious than any other births. Attaining self knowledge is an advantage of human birth. Human birth is more precious because human beings have the power of reason. They have the power of reason to know what is happiness and what is not happiness. Human beings can know what is Atman and what is Anatman. So this power of reason is not there in any other births. So that is how human birth is more precious than any other birth. So by this power of reason, whether what is happiness and what is not happiness, what is Atman and what is not Atman, man can attain self-knowledge. And that is how human birth is advantageous to attain self-knowledge. But getting human birth is very rare. If at all we have to get a human birth, ordinary human birth, we have to do human-like actions. That means we have to live and we have to allow others to live. That means live and let live is the law of morality. So the animals, they eat raw materials and they don't boil the food materials and eat. But the man eats the boiled food materials. Ahara nidra bhayamaithunancha samanyametad pashubirnaranam jnanamitesham adhiko visheshaha jnanena hinaha pashubi samanaha. In taking food, ahara, nidra. So the animals also sleep and man also sleeps. So common. Ahara nidra bhayamaitunamcha. The animals also have fear. And even man has also fear. So all these are common. And even the sexual indulgence is common to animals and man. And if that is the case, how human birth is more precious than any other birth? Even if we think, in case of taking food and getting sleep and having fear and involving in sexual indulgence, so these are common to animals and man. But man is inferior to animals in taking food, in getting sleep, and in case of fear and sexual indulgence. Let us try to know whether is a man is superior in all these or animals are superior. So the animals eat raw food materials. They don't boil the food material. They take the raw food material that has been available in the nature. But what man does, if at all he has to take food, he boils the food material. And when he boils, half of the nutrients have been burnt. Then he also roasts the materials. And when he roasts the materials and take the food, 75% of all the nutrients have been burnt. And lastly, he fries the food materials. When he fries the food materials, all the nutrients that have been present in the food will be lost. But the animals take raw food and the nutrients have not been burnt and they have maximum power of immunity. But man has lost the power of unity and he has been infected by many diseases. But there are no diseases to the animals. The monkeys are there, they have no COVID. Man is suffering from COVID, but not the monkeys because the monkeys have maximum power of immunity. So, in this way, in taking food, man is inferior to animals. Then let us take the case of sleep. All animals, the dog, the all animals, cat, even buffalo, they they get sound sleep. They sleep soundly. But the only animal on the surface of earth who doesn't get sleep is man. And if he doesn't get sleep, he becomes mad. And that is how there are mental hospitals for man only. But for the animals, there are no mental hospitals. So, in this way, in case of deep sleep also, man is inferior to animals. Then fear. Man has more fear than animals. The animals have no fear. In a night, they wander and they have no fear. They go to the burial ground and they graze there and they will have sound sleep there. Lastly, they return to the house. So, in case of fear, man is inferior to animals because he doesn't go out of the house during night. So, in this way, in case of fear, man is inferior to animals. Ahara nidra bhayamaitunancha. Maituna means sexual indulgence. The animals involved in sexual indulgence when there is the necessity of reproduction. They involve in sex only for reproduction. But the so-called man, they involve in sex for sensual enjoyment. He thinks if he involves in sex, he will get happiness. So it is not like that. There is no happiness in sexual indulgence. And he involves in sexual indulgence, and he says, no, I don't need any offspring, children. That means, in this case, in case of sexual indulgence, man is inferior to animals. And if that is the case, in which case he is superior? The Subhashitakara say, Jnanamahitesham adhiko vishesha. But man has the power of reason. The animals also have the power of reason. You throw stones to the monkeys, but they are so aware that the stones will don't touch them. So they have the power of reason, but they have no power of reasoning what is happiness, what is unhappiness, what is Atman and what is Anatman. So in this, man is superior to all other births. So in this way, man is inferior in case of food, taking food, getting sleep, having fear, and having the sexual indulgence. But the man has the power of discrimination by which he can escape from miserable cycle of birth and death. There is a cycle of births and deaths. So the cycle of births and deaths is there because we have the understanding that the sensory objects are givers of happiness. And man thinks that he is the gross body. So the cause of unhappiness is the understanding that there is happiness in sensory objects, and one is the gross body. But if we inquire, there is no happiness in sensual enjoyment, and there is no happiness in body consciousness. But the happiness is in the conscious entity, Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham, Shivoham. Happiness is only there in the Atman. By this type of understanding, man can escape from birth, from the cycle of, from the miserable cycle of births and deaths. So in this way, human birth is more precious than any other birth. ನರಜನ್ಮದೆಂಬ ಇಹದೊಳು ಮಿಗಿಲುಂಟೆ ನಿಜಗುಣ, the great says Nijuguna, He explains that human birth is more precious than any other birth. But all other living beings cannot escape from the miserable cycle of birth and death because they have no power of discrimination as what is happiness and not happiness, what is Atman and what is Anatman, like that. So there are three states, and these states are only to human beings. The gods and goddesses have only waking state, but the animals and the man have three states: the mundane waking, the dream, and the deep sleep. But the animals, though they have three states, but they cannot reason from waking state or from the dream and the deep sleep, like that, because they have no power of reasoning what is happiness and not happiness, what is Atman and Anatman. Though they have three states, but they don't make use of these three states for attaining the permanent happiness. But a man alone can make use of these three states, that is the mundane waking, dream, and deep sleep. The gods and goddesses have only waking state and they cannot reason out from dream and deep sleep states. And that is how human birth is more precious than the birth of gods and goddesses. He can reason from mundane waking, we can come to know that there is no happiness in mundane waking. The mundane waking ends in tiresomeness and weariness. Nobody in the waking state is happy, without any exception. So, by mundane waking, man can reason it is the state of unhappiness. Then, in case of dream, so the dream has been created by our mind, and the waking, mundane waking is also like a dream. If the mind creates the dream, why it cannot create the mundane waking? That means by dream we can come to know that the mundane waking is also created by the mind. Then by deep sleep, man can know that one is of the nature of happiness. In a deep sleep, man is in the form of consciousness. If we inquire the experience of deep sleep, he says there was nobody. And he says, I knew something. No, I didn't know anything, like that. And he says, yeah, I had a sound sleep. No, 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 I had no sound sleep at all, like that. And if that is the case, if a man knows whether there is anybody in the deep sleep or not, whether he did know or didn't know anything like that, or there was happiness or there was no happiness, like that, then who is the knowing entity of all these? If one says there was somebody, there was nobody, that means He knows whether there was somebody or not. He knows whether he knew anything or not. He knows there was happiness or not. So all these have been known by man. So man is of the nature of consciousness. In deep sleep, he remains as a consciousness by forgetfulness. And there is nothing, no sensory object is there. Nothing than the consciousness. And there is happiness. That means the consciousness is only of the nature of happiness. The happiness is in consciousness. And he is consciousness. That means he is of the nature of happiness. So, like this, by three states mundane waking, dream, and deep sleep we can know that there is no happiness in mundane waking, and the mundane waking is created by the mind only, and it is unreal, like the dream. And by deep sleep, we can know that we are of the nature of happiness. So that is how the human birth is more precious than any other birth. Human birth is more precious than the birth of gods and goddesses. Human birth is more precious than the birds and beasts. The birds and beasts have three shades, but they cannot reason out from the three shades that their nature is of the nature of bliss. So, in this way, human birth is more superior, more precious than any other birth. Then, how exactly he is more precious? Human birth is more precious than all other births. So, as he has the power of discrimination, by the power of discrimination, man can attain self knowledge. And self knowledge is an advantage of human birth. So that is how the human birth of man is to attain eternal peace. So these are common, In deep sleep, there is no body consciousness, there is no food, no fear, and no sexual indulgence. And even for man, uh, in waking state, the body consciousness is there. And even they get sleep, fear is there, sexual indulgence is there. These are common. Ahara nidra bhayamaitu nancha. सामान्यमेतत् पशुभिर्नराणाम् ज्ञानमेतेषाम् अधिको विशेषः ज्ञानेन हीनाः पशुभिः समानाः. So this taking food, getting sleep, having fear, and involving sex are common to animals and human beings. And all these four, the taking food materials, getting sleep, having fear, and involving in sex. So these have been caused by body consciousness. When there is a gross body consciousness, all these are there. So men who have been involved in taking food, getting sleep, having fear, and involving sex. So those men are animals only. And if that is the case, who is the real man? The real man is he who transcends taking food, getting sleep, having fear, and involving in sex. That means the self realized sages are only real men. And the birth of man is there to attain self knowledge. And if we have body conscious, no, then there are six enemies: desire, anger, craziness, infatuation, greed, egoism, and jealousy. All these six enemies are there when there is body consciousness. If we have the body consciousness, all these six enemies are there. And even there are enemies outside. We have enemies outside. Why the enemies are there in outside? Because we have desire for sensory objects. And if we understand that the sensory objects are givers of bliss, even there are enemies outside. So if we think that we are this gross body, then there will be six enemies inside in the mind, that is desire, anger, infatuation, greed, egoism, and jealousy. And even the enemies are there in the outside. But when we inquire, no, so man is not the gross body, but he is the knowing consciousness of the body. So we say there is pain in the body. That means who are the knowers of body and not this gross body. So we are the consciousness, and a man has the power of consciousness. And by this power of consciousness, he can know that he is consciousness. And he can attain Atmic consciousness, that is the Jnana Samadhi. He can become free from miserable cycle of birth and deaths, as he has the power of reason of whether what is happiness and what is not happiness, what is Atman and is what is not Atman. So by this power of reason, by this power of discrimination, man can attain permanent happiness by attaining self-knowledge. And no other birth in the world is capable of attaining self-knowledge and becoming permanently happy. So in this way, in brief, human birth is more precious than any other birth in the world. And by this, I end my talk.